Okay. Excuse me. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's meeting of Gedling Borough Council Planning Committee. We'll start out with agenda item 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Miller. Our substitutes are Councillor Creamer and Councillor Nayuk.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman.
It's been a couple of weeks. A couple of months, sorry.
Yes, apologies for Councillor Chris Barnfather, and Councillor Sam Smith is in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on 7th of September, which you'll find on pages 5 to 16. Would somebody like to move? Thank you. And second? Okay, all those who agree they were an accurate record who were there, please, I won't because I wasn't there, okay. And against, and abstentions, thank you, that is passed. Planning Committee protocol you'll find on pages 17 to 19. I hope you've all read it and understood it and put it into practice. Declarations of interest. I will declare collective item of interest for item number 4, application number 2022-0240, the Netherfield Methodist Church, Victoria Road, the collective interest on the basis that the council owns part of the application site. And on item 8, application number 2022/0819, the Recreation Ground, Muirfield Road, a collective interest on the basis that the council is the applicant and owns the application site. Any from the floor? Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Yes, thank you. I would like to declare that I might be perceived as predetermined with regard to application 2022-0819, the Recreation Ground, Muirfield Road, because I have been involved in lobbying for the CCTV. Therefore, I will not participate or vote in that item.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor David Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. On the same item, 2022-0819, in addition to the general interest, I signed off the application to the report to develop CCTV there, so I won't be taking part in the debate at all.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further declarations of interest from the floor? Nope. Okay, we'll move on to the first substantive item on the agenda, which is item number 4, application number 2022-0240, Netherfield Methodist Church, Victoria Road, which you'll find on page 22 of your agenda papers. And we have a speaker on that particular item, which is Mr. Oliver Camel, who is speaking on behalf of Hockley Developments, who are the applicants. Could come to the lectern, please. If you could speak into the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Have 3 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to introduce myself as Oliver Camel, the Senior Architectural Designer for Hockley Developments, who put forward this application for the Netherfield Methodist Church for its change of use and conversion to 13 single occupancy dwellings, which are proposed to aid the council to meet its supported living housing demand. The church has previously seen an important part of the community, but unfortunately has not been fit for purpose over the last few years, being too costly to heat and maintain. So we intend to give the building a new lease of life and upgrade it to modern standards suitable for residential purposes, raising the EPC ratings from an F to a C. I've been invited to speak previously at the Netherfield steering group meetings, which I've appreciated the opportunity to. I'm going to quickly address the main points that were raised at these meetings. Being supported living, the tenant profile for this scheme is sort of going to require light care and ongoing support with their day-to-day lives. This support is provided by a nominated care provider who manage the property after the development's completion. The tenants will be a mixture of genders and ages ranging from 18 upwards. These potential tenants are first assessed by the care provider that they're suitable for the housing within the scheme, and they're expected to sign a tenancy agreement and then uphold the standards of that tenancy agreement and contract. There's going to be a staff office located on the scheme, where staff will be there 24/7. This office is located at the forefront of the scheme, overlooking the communal entrance, parking spaces, and amenity spaces as well, which subsequently, with a CCTV system, will provide a safe and secure environment not only for the residents themselves, but also the neighbouring properties adjoining as well. The main points raised by the local community during these steering groups focused on highways and parking implications that the change of use may have. I would like to think that with our proposals, compared to the prior use, the scheme will have a reduced level in vehicles, parking, noise and congestion. As a supported living scheme, the tenants aren't expected to have their own personal vehicles. And with other schemes across Nottingham, we've provided up to 2 parking spaces, which has been more than suitable. However, with this scheme, fortunately, we've got a bit more space, and we're providing 6 spaces along with some high-quality external amenity space for the residents as well. So comparing it back to the community hall use previously, we're expected to lower the number of parking spaces that's required, along with the congestion and noise and traffic that goes along with that. The vehicular access point of the site currently is only wide enough for 1 car to go past. We're going to widen this to modern highway standards, to allow 2 cars to pass each other, which will increase the safety of road users along Victoria Road, as long as the pedestrian users of this road as well. Ultimately, these changes and provisions will ensure that the site performs considerably better than its previous use, and therefore neighbouring properties don't need to be worried about on-street parking increasing or emergency vehicles not having access to their dwellings. To summarise quickly, we believe we've provided a design which is suitable for the intended use, adds value locally, whilst breathing new life into a building which is in need of a large amount of investment to bring it up to the sustainability and energy standards, moving forward into its next lifetime as a residential scheme. At the same time, providing housing for those who need it most. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Now I'd like to ask Mike Avery to summarise the application.
Thank you, Chairman. The site is situated in close proximity to the Netherfield local centre and is surrounded predominantly by residential properties, with the exception of a commercial unit on the corner of Dennis Street and Victoria Road. There have been 9 letters of representation received in relation to the application, and these are summarised in your reports. The principle of the development has been considered against Local Planning Document Policy LPD 56, which identifies that applications for development of community facilities, including places of worship, will not be granted permission unless particular criteria outlined in the policy are met. The requirements of the policy have been considered and are considered to be met. I wanted to specifically highlight that the St George's Community Centre is situated in close proximity to the application site and provides alternative provision with sufficient capacity. The building is currently vacant and has been so for a significant period of time. So the slide on the screen now clearly shows the existing building, which is of some architectural merit. Very minor alterations are proposed to the building in order to facilitate the conversion. And the impact of the alterations have been fully considered, having regard to residential amenity considerations, and those are clearly detailed in the report. The car parking provision for the development is below the standards set out in the Council's car parking supplementary planning document. Weight is, however, given to the proximity of the development to the Netherfield designated shopping centre, shopping area and the Victoria Retail Park, where there are a number of amenities within short walking distance of the application site, and the fact that the application site is on a bus route. I'm also mindful of the nature of the development, which is supported living accommodation, where occupants are perhaps not as likely to have access to a vehicle. Planning obligations are sought in relation to a bus stop improvement to the value of £8,825, a monitoring fee for the planning obligation, and a local labour agreement. No affordable housing is sought as the proposed development has been designed for supported living, and there is a specific exemption for such developments in the National Planning Policy Framework. Chairman, I recommend that permission is granted in accordance with the recommendation detailed in the report, but with an amendment to include the planning obligation monitoring fee as detailed in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So you'll find the proposal on page 22 of your agenda papers, which is conversion of existing church property with subsequent change of use from community centre, 13 one-bed residential dwelling spaces, etc., etc. Would anybody like to move
it and reserve the right to speak?
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Anyone who wants to second it? Thank you very much. Right. We will open that for discussion. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm right in reading this correctly, that on point 7.5, page 27, says the introduction of the supported living accommodation will provide a mix of housing types, which is welcomed in the area. Although I note that if the application were to be granted, the permission would not restrict occupation to those in need of supported living. So, which ties in with point 722 on page 29, which also makes the point quite clear that this is not actually, there's no guarantee this is going to be a supported living site. And so it begs the question, once again, knowing the difficulties that residents have with parking in Netherfield on these tight streets with tight Victorian-style roads with many terrace-style properties, why we are going against our own parking policy of 0.8 per unit for per bed property, and instead deciding to go at less than half, slightly more than half of that requirement. I just don't get it. I don't understand why we have a policy if we're not prepared to follow it.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. So picking up on your first point in relation to the use, so you make the point around supported living, and you obviously reference the description of the development as well, which is residential. Just having regard to the proposed layout of the development, it's clearly being designed as a supported living development. So there's some communal area at ground floor, including a staff area on the plans. So the development would need to be constructed in accordance with the development shown on the approved plans, if permission were to be granted. So any variances to these plans would need permission from the council. So I think members should be reassured that in terms of the nature of the development, it would have to be the internal layouts would have to be constructed entirely in accordance with the proposed plans. In relation to our car parking requirement, the SPD does allow flexibility for sites which are in a sustainable location. And as detailed in the report, and as I highlighted when I introduced the item, this site is located in a very sustainable location, and there's a good bus service. So having regard to the very sustainable location of the site, the good bus service, and the fact that this has been designed for supported living, it's considered that there should be a relaxation to the standards set out in the SPD. But the SPD and policy LPD 57 specifically permit that when there is agreement from the local planning authority, and that view has been informed by comments that we've had from the Highways Authority, that they're content with the level of car parking provision in this instance.
Yes, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, but just to reaffirm that, the Highways Authority aren't responsible for the car parking spaces on site. The SPD is controlled by Gedling Borough Council, not by Nottinghamshire County Council. I'm right in saying that. And secondly, it doesn't move away from the fact that regardless of how the internal workings are structured, this property could still turn into 11 privately sold flats to be sold on the open market, as specified in both point 7.5 on page 27 and point 7.22 on page 29. That is correct, isn't it?
Any variation of the plans would need further consideration by the local planning authority. But in terms of our SPD, that does allow flexibility on a case-by-case basis, and we've given weight to the location of the site in this particular instance, which is well served by public transport. So, yeah, I'd specifically refer you to paragraph 7.20 in the report. I don't intend to read through all of that, but that sets out the policy basis upon which we make that assessment.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm still not clear on this, because what Mr Avery is saying is that it would be required by the council to determine if it was to change, but it doesn't say that. I don't see where it's. If you can point to me at the point where it says that it would need the council's permission to change it to open market sale.
No, it would need consent from the council to construct this development in a different consideration, in a different configuration to that shown on the approved plans. So at the moment, what the proposed plans are showing is a communal area downstairs. So if this was constructed entirely in accordance with the proposed plans, you're quite right, it could be sold as market housing. That is correct. In terms of the car parking requirements, our policy permits flexibility in locations which are sustainable. So given the proximity of this site to the centre of Netherfield, the regularity of bus services, we give significant weight to those factors, and that is that's permissible having regard to the local planning document policy, LPD 57. It allows standards to otherwise be agreed by the local planning authority.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Adams?
Yeah, yes, Chair, but I think it's just sad days for Netherfield that this continues to happen with not adequate parking provided for development. It's just.
Do we have any more contributions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Barnes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I think the planners have done quite a good job. This sort of development is what we need in the community. And to put it in this sort of area where you don't need public transport, you don't need your own private transport. There's quite a good bus service in that level. It's right near the shop, it's right near the community, it's right near the social activity of the voluntary organisation. And I think some of these people who we need some help for, and I think this makes them, give them that bit more policy in life where they can live on their own and be their own individuals for a bit instead of being in an institution. I think this is something which none of us likes in our own area, but sometimes we have no alternative, and we have to help these sort of people, because then if we don't help them, the private sector won't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elwood.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, similar to Councillor Adams, I had concerns about the car parking issue, and it certainly, with regard to this, it being a supported living accommodation, it doesn't seem unreasonable that it's, there's only 6 car parking spaces, so that seems okay. It's what's, as Councillor Adams referred to, what happens if it then becomes conventional accommodation. Mr Avery has given some reassurance, I suppose, and I know we're referring to almost like a hypothetical situation on what would happen, down the line in something that may never occur. But if we do get into a situation where the site, another application comes in to convert it into conventional accommodation, presumably at that point, the issue of car parking would be readdressed at that point. I just have some concerns that a future applicant might say, well, we've got 6 car parking spaces, it's fine, no problem, and sort of brush that under the carpet, so to speak, even though that a future development might be totally different in that regard. So that would be my concern. But I can see that it would need another. It sounds like it would need another application to convert it into conventional accommodation. So that does give some reassurance on that issue, I suppose. Thank you.
So just to provide some further clarification on that point, there would only be a revised application if the internal layout of the development were to change. So that should give members some reassurance. If the development were to proceed and it was constructed entirely in accordance with this layout, these could revert from supported living to market units without a further consent being required from the local planning authority. The point that I make is that the configuration, which includes some communal area at ground floor level, this is clearly being designed for supported living. So that is, members should be reassured by the proposed layout, which is put forward as part of this application. In terms of the actual car parking requirement, it is in a very central location. So if these were market units that came forward, in terms of those considerations, that the site would still be in a very sustainable location. It would still be well served by public transport. So that would be given significant weight if revised drawings did come forward.
Yeah, I would say that, we ought to concentrate on the fact, as you said yourself, Councillor Elwood, we've got to concentrate on the planning application in front of us and not try and speculate what may or may not happen in the future. That's something that we can't take into consideration at this point. We've just got to consider the application as it stands in front of us. Councillor Smith, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to come back on Councillor Elwood's point, because the officers answered it clearly, but in officer talk, just so everyone's aware, this development can be built as is drawn on there and then sold off for flats or single occupation without the need for this committee to have a single thing about it. So what we're doing is we could potentially create ourselves a problem with the car parking because it goes against our own policy on the basis that assisted living residents will move in. But there is no restriction in this application to ensure that happens, not one. So we don't need to come back again. Once that's built to the specification as set out in this application, it can be sold off and we don't get a say in it. And I just asked the question, why in this application are we not restricting the class use to supported living or something of that nature? Why are we not doing that? And on parking, which this goes against our own policy on, which why have a policy if you can go against it? But when, because there's no point, I wholeheartedly detest the suggestion every time we sit in this committee, particularly around Netherfield, where we say, well, visitors and other occupants, if it goes above the parking spaces, can park in the shopping precinct. This council has done a lot of work to improve the shopping precinct in Netherfield, and all we're suggesting every time we talk about Netherfield applications is we'll kill the high street because the car parking for shoppers and to support jobs and businesses will be full of visitors to developments like this or HMOs or anything. It is ridiculous. We should not be doing that to a high street that this council spent a lot of money improving. So my simple question is, why are we not restricting the use of this development, please?
The application's been submitted for C3 residential units. It's been designed for supported living. And as I've detailed earlier on, in terms of the car parking provision, it is in a very sustainable location. It is very accessible by public transport, so we give significant weight to those considerations. And in my view, the officer assessment it will be no different.
Councillor Parr.
Thank you, Chairman. Question to Mr Avery, if I may. My thoughts are, and possibly the thoughts of quite a few people here and the residents in that particular area, do we see that will improve the character of the area, the development?
It would retain a building which, you know, is in my view, of significant architectural merit. So it's not a non-designated heritage asset. It's not a listed building, but it does have, a significant amount of character, and it would retain it. Very much welcome the retention of the historic building, rather than an application which will propose the demolition and a rebuild on that site. So I'm sure locally, it will be accepted that building does have some architectural merit.
Councillor Paling, did I see you indicate?
You did, Chair, thank you. I just wanted to make the comment that we seem to be confusing the growing number of HIMOs that are happening in the area, which are causing concern with parking, and this supported living accommodation. I see no reason to doubt that this is an application for supported living. I see no reason to doubt that the car parking will be sufficient for the need of that community and the staff that will be working with the people. And I'm disappointed that people are challenging a hypothetical situation for the future based on the parking issue of today.
Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Chair. I've been listening to the debate and I'm now a little concerned. Can I ask, is it possible to put a condition into this planning application that does restrict the people in this building when it's completed to be requiring supported living? And if it is possible, why don't we just do it and then we can all agree that it's something that we would like to see?
It's an application for Class C3, so to apply a condition which would change the actual proposal, that would be unreasonable. So I think this has to be assessed, that it's an application for 13 one-bedroom apartments which have been designed for supported living. That is shown in the plans which have been proposed with the application. Car parking provision has been assessed. It is below standard. However, the site is in a very sustainable location, so the application needs to be assessed on the basis of its merits. So to apply, to add an additional condition to change the description of the proposal, that wouldn't be reasonable to do that.
Yes, Councillor Hope.
Can I briefly come back on that? I got the impression, what makes you think then that this is designed for supportive living? I assume that was part of the application from the person who wanted to develop it. Is that not the case?
So the person who wanted to develop the site, so the applicant for planning permission, they have provided information in their supporting documents that this would be supported living. What the case officer has done is they've assessed the information that's been submitted. They've also had consideration to the proposed plans, which quite clearly show a layout which would appear to meet the requirements of residents requiring supported living. So there are some communal areas downstairs. There appears to be a staff office downstairs, which you wouldn't normally have in an apartment scheme proposing 13 residential units. So I think members should take some confidence that there's a reasonable likelihood that this would come forward as supported living. If it was sold on the open market, There would be a deficiency in terms of the level of car parking spaces, but this is in a very sustainable location, and our own policy allows us to apply flexibility. The Highways Authority have seen this. They've seen the plans. They can quite clearly see that it's 13 one-bed apartments, and we give weight to the layout, which is clearly showing that it's supported living.
Thank you. Councillor Creamer?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm reasonably happy without speculating about what's going to happen in the future, because my speculation is if I was going to buy a one-bedroom apartment, I would want it to actually somewhat bigger and actually converted from that, which means going back to the planning committee and back here again. So the speculation of what it's going to be used in the future for, I'm quite happy that if it was to be sold on, nobody would buy it as is. It would have to be altered, and any alterations would have to come back here anyway. So again, just playing with its speculation, you can play in both ways. I'm happy that it's going to be where it is. It's happy that people are going to be able to actually interact with the community because it's in the right place for just about everything. So yeah, I'm happy where it is at the moment. I think the speculation is actually doing nothing for it at all. So yes, I will be voting for it.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to rehearse any of the complaints about this particular development. I'm satisfied with Mr. Avery's explanation on various points. He mentioned, and I would follow. Can you stop whispering, please? Because you're irritating. If you want to whisper, go to the back. No, but you're annoying.
Okay, please.
Sorry, Chair. Could you ask the Conservative group not to whisper when I'm trying to speak, because it is very irritating.
Absolutely. Please, councillors there, try and keep quiet while the debate is on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As I was saying, Mr. Avery has already mentioned the fact that this building has architectural merits and it won't be demolished, unlike another one which was demolished some time ago, and that was the old vicarage, which is now St George's Centre. He's also mentioned about St George's Centre, and of course the users of the old Loco Centre, as the thing was called, have now moved into the doctor's surgery just behind St George's Centre, so there's plenty of community use. It does seem to me that this is an excellent use of this. It has been empty for some time. I look forward to it being developed. I would just add that I was very disappointed to see on the Nottingham Post's website, This is Nottingham, a report which said neighbours uncertain on, quote, bonkers church plan set to increase, quote, growing problem in Netherfield. Whenever there is a development for housing of any kind, the Post seems to latch on to the negative comments. It's interesting because 3 people are quoted in this report, one from Colic, one from Arnold, and one from Netherfield. The one from Netherfield may be a neighbour, but that doesn't actually mean that they should say neighbours are uncertain. And in terms of the consultations, those have all been addressed, some of which are non-material. So I wholeheartedly support this scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to contribute? Are you all content that I Well, before I move to the vote, I'd like to say on my own part, I'm surprised there's been so much discussion over this. I consider it to be an excellent development, which provides an essential social need in supporting a living programme, as well as preserving what, in my opinion, is an excellent, substantial and very distinctively architectural building. So I myself will certainly vote in favour of this. Are we all content to move to the vote? Right. So we have the recommendation on page 32 of your agenda papers, which is to grant planning permission subject to the owner entering into planning obligations securing through a Section 106 agreement, etc., as detailed in that paragraph. All those in favour, please show. Okay. And against? And abstentions? Okay, thank you. That planning application has been approved. So we can move on to the next one, which is agenda item 5, the application 2014/0273, land at the corner of Longdane Lane and Kig Hill Lane, Ravenshead, which you'll find on page 36 of your agenda papers. And Mike Avery will elaborate on this particular application.
Thank you, Chairman. The application was before members of the Planning Committee on the 8th of August 2018. Whilst progress has been made in relation to the legal agreement, it was never completed. Additionally, the applicant has indicated a desire to have the option to develop all or part of the site as a custom-build or self-build development. The only changes proposed to facilitate this is the introduction of a phasing condition with subsequent amendments to the preceding conditions. Since the previous consideration of the report by councillors in 2018, the relevant policies detailed in the report have been reviewed, and they do not raise any new material considerations in relation to the principle of development. The low carbon planning guidance for Gedling was adopted in 2021 and it's now considered to be necessary to propose an additional condition requiring the provision of an electric vehicle charging point at each of the proposed properties. The planning obligations have been reviewed in light of the updated consultation responses and amendments to the planning practice guidance. The public open space contribution would remain unchanged. The affordable housing requirement is up to 9 dwellings, should the subsequent approval of reserved matters application comprise 31 dwellings. 3 of the dwellings would consist of first homes and 9 would be affordable homes for rent. While there's an affordable housing exemption at paragraph 65 of the National Planning Policy Framework for people who wish to build their own homes, this provision is not considered to be engaged as the application is made by a landowner looking to dispose of the site on the open market, and it's been confirmed that this is not an application solely for custom-built properties. So I think the intention of the landowner is to market the site, and that's the indication that's been provided specifically to officers in writing. In relation to first homes, a report proposing an interim planning policy statement was approved by Cabinet on the 6th of October, setting out our local approach, which is permitted by the planning practice guidance. So our local requirements are as follows. A first home must be discounted by a minimum of 30% against the market value. After the discount has been applied, the first sale must be at a price no higher than $173,000. Purchasers of first homes should have a combined annual household income not exceeding £38,800, and we also set out a local connection test, which is detailed in the report. The bus stop financial contribution has now increased to £18,800. A local labour agreement is still required, but this should only apply to plots which are not developed by self-builders. It just simply wouldn't be possible to require a local labour agreement should some of the plots come forward by self-builders, because they will all be commissioning their own developers to construct their property. The education contribution for the 6 secondary school places has increased to £157,524. The NHS has confirmed that the primary care contribution is £16,906, and details of the relevant practices where the contribution should be expended have now been provided. A management company responsible for the upkeep of the private access drives and open spaces not within the curtilages of the dwellings or adopted by the Borough Council or the Parish Council is still required and is proposed. In addition to the information contained in the report, a Section 106 monitoring fee will also be required in accordance with our policy. Chairman, it's recommended that permission is granted in accordance with the report, but with the addition of a Section 106 monitoring fee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So there we have the proposal, which is outlined planning permission for up to 31 dwelling with all matters reserved. Would somebody like to move that? Thank you. And second? Thank you very much. And would anybody like to open the discussion? Councillor Paling.
Thank you, Chair. I have absolutely no objection to this application and will be voting in favour of it. I'm just a little surprised that the amount being requested by Health is so low when they're stating that 3 surgeries are already over capacity, and yet they're asking for less than a bus stop. I don't know how the algorithm works. It must be based on something, but it does seem very low when we are so short of health facilities.
I agree, Councillor Palin. It does seem a relatively low sum, but the NHS have provided, they've used a calculation, and they provided the amount to us, and they've set out which practices that contribution should be expended at. So that was a specific reconsultation that was undertaken to ensure that the contribution remained correct.
Any more contributions from the floor? Yes, Councillor Hope.
Yeah, can I sort of, it's a general question really. I noticed that there's going to be some private drives, and it says there should be a management company, a plan for a management company to look after these private drives. Does that management company look after those drives in perpetuity, you know, like forever? Or is it time limited or what? Because as you know, I cannot see any reason ever to allow development with private roads on it simply because they lead to problems in quite a few other areas. So, you know, maintenance is quite important. Will they be maintained forever by the management company that's looking after them?
That's certainly the intention, that the management company would remain in place in perpetuity. The other option is to not have a management company, so there would be a limited number of properties that will be accessed from each of the private driveways. But this is just the reason that the case officer, both the current case officer and the previous case officer wanted this specific requirement, was to deal precisely with that issue. If there are issues around maintenance going forward, with the various homeowners and the parties, to ensure that there is an appropriate management arrangement in place. And normally the way in which this works is that homeowners will be required to contribute towards that management company to pay for the upkeep of those spaces, so the private drives, the incidental open spaces, which are not adopted by the Borough Council or the Parish Council or the Highways Authority, to ensure that they're properly maintained going forward.
Any more questions or contributions from the floor? Okay, so you're quite happy to move to the vote on this, are you? Or content, if not all ecstatically happy. The recommendation you'll find on page 69, which is that we grant outline planning permissions subject to the applicant entering into a Section 106 agreement with the Borough Council, etc., as detailed in that paragraph on page 69. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. And against and abstentions, that development is approved. Thank you very much. So now we move on to the next one, which is item number 6, application 2022/0584, land at Northwest Park Road, Calverton, which you'll find on page 78 of your agenda papers. And I'll ask Nigel Bryan to introduce and elaborate on this application.
Thank you, Chair. The application seeks reserve matters approval pursuant to the outline permission 2018-0607. Matters under consideration for this reserve matters approval are layout, scale, landscaping and appearance. And reserve matters approval on the larger site has already been granted for 351 dwellings, and this application, as you can see in red, is for a replan that would, for 101 units, would actually increase the units by an additional 12 to 363. The main change really is to this area in the north, whereas previously the built form ran roughly along that boundary. They're looking to extend partly into that area here, and also just a slight amendment in this area due to a private right-of-way. The main change really is the number of units to be erected. However, the POS will still meet the requisite 10%. The house types would largely be the same as previously approved. In terms of the additional 12, that would result in 3 additional affordable housing units, and that would be 2 additional affordable rent, and there to be 4-bed units. And there would also be the 1 shared ownership. These are just some of the house types that they're proposing to use and would largely be the same as previously granted. The proposal complies with the outline in terms of numbers, and they'll be using the same house types, a degree of continuity in terms of elevation treatments for the units. They've also started on the site. So these are some of the units that are actually built, and these pictures were taken, this morning. So this is the kind of quality of the build that they're doing, so that you can see they've got the decent detailing around the windows, etc. And these are just some that are literally going up as you're coming in off Park Road. And this is just one of the actual site where the units would change. As you can see, they've largely just cleared it. But in terms of the recommendation, it complies with the outline, and recommending approval as outlined on pages 89 to 91 of the committee report. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. So the proposal is application for approval of a reserved matters application, which you find on page 78. Would somebody like to move that? Thank you. And second it? Thank you very much. I'd like to open the discussion or debate, bearing in mind that to all intents and purposes this was approved already back in September 2020, so there shouldn't be too much contentious about it. Anybody like to contribute or question? Nope. You're quite happy that I move then to the vote. The recommendation you'll find on page 89, which is to grant reserve matters approval subject to the imposition of conditions, which is set out in a long list below that. Can I see all those in favour, please show? Thank you. And against and abstentions, that planning application has been approved. So what have we got next? The application 2021 1464 Ashdale, Nottingham Road, Burton Joyce, which you'll find on page 94 of your agenda papers, which is variation of conditions on the Ashdale Road development. This is going to be outlined for us by Nigel again, who's still at the lectern. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. It's an outline application for the erection of 11 dwellings with matters of access, layout and scale being considered, and this was what was granted on the... Apologies. This is an outline application for the erection of 11 dwellings with matters of access, layout and scale being considered under the previous permission and also under this subsequent application to vary those conditions. The main change that is proposed, and this shows the layout this was previously approved, is that they're looking to change these 2 units in this area into bungalows, and you'll see as well that these units are going to go from link attached properties to detached. So I'll flip between the two. So these are the units that are now going to be bungalows, and as you'll see, these units are going to be detached. So they're making just some minor changes to the layout. Fundamentally, it won't change away from the design along that main spine road. One of the other key changes really is that the Highway Authority have indicated they aren't willing to adopt the highway into the site because there's a private water pipe that runs through it. So to address that, we're intending to have an additional Section 106 legal agreement to ensure that the highway is under the control of a management company, similar to what Mike Avery outlined previously. But overall, the actual changes to the layout and scale are considered to be appropriate. The housing mix will arguably improve, and they're going to have some bungalows, whereas previously they were all proposed to be 2-storey dwellings. And there's just a few pictures from the site. But overall, we consider the changes to be relatively minor beyond that what was previously granted permission, and actually probably be an enhancement through the amended house types. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So the proposal is a variation of conditions on 3, 4 and 18 on Planning Permission 2020/0238 as detailed on page 94. Would somebody like to move that? Thank you. And second? Thank you. Would any have any questions or contributions on this application? Nope. Are you quite content that I move to the vote on that then? You'll find the recommendation on page 105, which is to grant planning permission subject to the owner entering into a planning application secured through Section 106 agreement, agree, etc., as detailed in the paragraphs underneath that. Can I see all those in favour, please show? And against? And abstentions? Okay. Right. We go on to planning application number 8, which is Recreation Ground, Muirfield Road, which you'll find on page 116 of your agenda papers, which is to install a 6-metre column together with a 2-metre antenna, etc., etc. I don't think anybody needs to introduce this. It's all self-explanatory. Would anybody like to move that application? Thank you. And second? Thank you. Anybody like to make any comments? We're quite happy to move to the vote. The recommendation you'll find on page 119, which is to grant conditional planning permission subject to the conditions set out below. All those in favour, please show. And against, and abstentions. Thank you. Now we move on to appeals. And the first one is Appeal 9, the appeal decision, which you find on page 121 of your agenda papers. It's a bit complicated, so I'll leave it up to Mike Avery to explain it for us.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will recall that Planning Committee approved enforcement action in relation to unauthorised buildings, security cameras and lighting columns, front boundary walls with lanterns and gates, the erection of 2 ornamental statues, and an unauthorised change of use at the site from the to the storage and repair of motor vehicles. The extant planning permission is for an equine use with a stable. 2 enforcement notices were served. One for the unauthorised change of use. We had concerns about the nature of the car repairs, dismantling and storage activities, particularly with regard to their suitability in the Greenbelt, and also the impact which the unauthorised activities were having upon the residential amenity enjoyed by the occupiers of adjoining properties. The second notice was in respect of the unauthorised structures. The stable block is constructed to a very high standard, and there were concerns in relation to the fact that that building was not constructed in accordance with the approved plans. Additionally, there was an unauthorised 3-sided building which had been constructed, and we can see where the cars jacked up inside that building. So that building wasn't shown on any of the approved plans, which had been approved by the council as part of the planning permission. The landowner appealed against the enforcement notices and made a full application for costs, alleging unreasonable behaviour of the local planning authority for pursuing enforcement action and for issuing 2 notices, which they allege were a nullity. The first enforcement notice, alleging the unauthorised change of use, was quashed by the planning inspectorate. At the hearing, the former tenant, who was operating the unauthorised business, provided a statement setting out that they were dismantling and valeting vehicles and not repairing and storing vehicles, as alleged in the council's notices. This was clearly refuted by officers in attendance at the hearing. We can quite clearly see, there's the Mini, which is jacked up, and for all intents and purposes, that car was being repaired rather than being dismantled or being valeted. The planning inspector was persuaded by the evidence and concluded that the alleged use was not, as a matter of fact, taking place on the date when the notices were served by the council. The planning inspector did, however, accept that the local planning authority was not at fault for this error. So prior to serving the notice, we served a planning contravention notice seeking details of the ownership of the land and details of the activities which were taking place. The appellant had a statutory duty to complete the notice, but failed to do so. And the only time they would actively engage with our officers was when we'd actually served the enforcement notices, and then the alleged unreasonable behaviour, because the precise uses which were set out in the notice were incorrect. It should be noted that whilst the notice has been quashed, at the time of the hearing site visit, the use had ceased in its entirety and all vehicles and parts had been removed from the site, and it's in a very tidy condition. So this is, notwithstanding the fact that the notice was quashed, this is a positive outcome for the council, in that costs were not awarded because it was accepted that the council was not at fault for any of the errors here, and the appellant should have provided the council when returning the PCN, which they had that statutory duty to complete. In relation to the second appeal regarding the operational development, so this is the buildings, the boundary wall, and structures and landscaping in front of the wall, it was necessary for officers to withdraw the steps in the enforcement notice relating to the boundary wall, gates and statues and the raised landscaping area to the front of the wall, as this land may not be within the ownership of the appellant and not all of the interested parties have been served a notice. Officers demonstrated at the hearing and in their written submissions that the land registry plan is not entirely clear in terms of the front boundary wall and other land ownerships. The planning inspectorate accepted that clarification in respect of land ownership should have been provided by the appellant, who again should have completed that planning contravention notice response, which they were legally required to do. So the council is not at fault for the errors in that second notice, which was amended by the planning inspectorate. So the planning inspectorate removed all of the references to the breaches which are outside of the appellant's ownership. So the appellant is now required to undertake the following works within 3 months of the date of the decision, being the 2nd of, and that date for compliance is the 2nd of November 2022. So they now need to alter the brick-built stable building so that it's in accordance with the planning permission. So we can see that, you know, the doors and windows, domestic in appearance, the plans which were approved do not show some of these doors and windows. So that needs to be remedied. They need to demolish the unauthorised three-sided building where the car is jacked up, and they need to remove all lighting and security camera columns from the land. In relation to the boundary wall and the landscaping in front of it, there's now going to be a further investigation, and a new enforcement notice will be served if the council is within statutory time limits for doing so, and this is currently being investigated. So members are asked to note the information. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, agenda item 11, another appeal, the Wrinkly Lettuce Cafe, retrospective election of decking, which we say. Oh, Warren Hill, I'm very sorry. Agenda item 10, Warren Hill Community Church, erection of 6 two-storey dwellings. That was appealed against, and the appeal has been dismissed, as is detailed on page 128. And the next one is indeed the Wrinkly Lettuce with a retrospective erection of decking, which they appealed, and once again the appeal was dismissed. Longdale Lane, Ravenshead, application of detached garage, which we refused permission on, and they appealed, and the appeal was allowed. Although we were very surprised at this because we thought we were absolutely within our rights to maintain that the garage where it was out of character with the area, but there were again, government inspectors are only human, they make mistakes, so we just have to note that information. Agenda item 13 is future planning applications. Any questions on those? No. Agenda item 14 is planning delegation panel action sheets. Any questions or queries on that? Nope. Okay. That brings us in conclusion to agenda item 15. Any other items that the chair considers urgent? I don't have any items that I consider urgent, so I'd like to thank you all for attending the committee and wish you all a very safe journey home, and be careful now that the nights are getting dark. Thank you.